All right, man, so we are in week 3 of release, and we are talking about forgiveness and releasing the pain and releasing the bitterness and the unforgiveness that can really destroy our lives. So I'm going to give you a brief overview here. In the first week, we talk about the stages of release, and that is going through denial, going through anger, blaming, depression, choosing to sedate. That is to consume addiction, to begin to push down the pain, and to begin to ignore the signs and the symptoms and all of those things. But ultimately, that leads to, if we come out of that stage, if we come through that process, it leads to acceptance, and it leads to empowerment, and it really leads to a healing process and a life of honesty. That took us into week 2, is what God's process and what He does inside of our lives, and we know that Jesus has come to heal the brokenhearted, right? The Bible says that He was anointed to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, and such. And we broke that down, and we talked about how first and foremost, he brings us out of pauperhood, and that is this mindset of lack. It is the mindset of scarcity, and it's just this overall state and condition of living below your purpose and potential. And he of course brings us out of that and begins to mend our broken heart and the places that we're out of alignment. See, our main core problem is that we are out of alignment. Our heart has been damaged, and it needs, we need a new creation process. We need a new heart. And so this is the process where we begin to get in alignment with God, which leads us to freedom for the captives. And that's understanding that addictions and everything that we face has been destroyed. And that if we look at the situation, we will honestly assess that we have been delivered and that we have freedom over that situation. So that's beginning to walk inside of that. Recovery of clarity and vision. This is where our eyes begin to be open. We begin to get a vision for our lives, and we begin to get a lot of clarity about what is taking place inside of our lives. And all of this has to do with illumination and beginning to walk inside of light and begin to understand the revelation that God has given us. And lastly, He comes through the process to heal those wounds. And that is throughout this process of life, especially if you're listening to this and you have been involved in some form of addiction, you're going to experience pain, loss, and trauma. Most addiction is related to adverse childhood experiences and not knowing and having the skills to be able to cope with what you're dealing with. And so you try to figure it out on your own. And so understanding this is that God wants to take us through these processes. And through understanding and going through these things, do we come to the other side of release and forgiveness. And that causes us to live lighter. He promised this. And I've told you probably in the last episode that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. And He said, come to me and I will give you rest. And so this is a different sort of lifestyle where that pressure and that pain and that baggage, that's what it is, it's baggage that we are carrying can be taken off of us. So we are going to talk about some of the hindrances to that process. Because, you know, it all sounds nice and easy. Tim, you want me to let go of my pain. You want to let go of the bitterness that I've been holding on to and the resentments and all of these different things. You just want me to let it go. But what does that mean? And what is in my way? What is the challenges that I face to accomplish that? Now, I find that to be very important. Now, C.S. Lewis said this, that getting over a painful experience is much like crossing the monkey bars. And that is, you have to let go at some point in order to move forward. And this is the way I find this process working out, is that we want to move forward, And forward progress always comes with the letting go of what is behind us. And this is why Paul said, forget the things that are behind you and press forward to the things that are before. Much like the monkey bars, if I want to swing forward, I release from what is behind me. And so this is what needs to take place in our life. But the bottom line is that we have challenges and we have objections and we have things, mental things that are in our way from accomplishing this sort of release. And so that's what we're going to dive into. Number one, we're going to talk about belief systems. Okay? There are things that we hold in our mind that keep us stuck, that keep us angry, that keep us bitter. And the first one I can think of is that I can't forgive, I can't let go of this thing because I have been wronged. Now, in this situation, we must understand that we are not in any way challenging that an injustice happened to you. And that's where we get mixed up. We think that forgiving might take away the actual offense and the injustice that is taking place to you. Now, the reality is that you may have experienced a severe trauma or pain or something caused to you by another person. And when the idea of forgiveness comes up, a mental roadblock begins to happen in our mind. But I was wronged. Okay? And so what I want to put it into today is the idea of, yes, you were wrong, but you could still let go. You could still choose to let go. Now, this in no way challenges what happened to you was an injustice or you were wronged in any way. In fact, this may very well be the case. Okay? But coming to the decision that I am going to let go says I may have been wronged. I may have had an injustice happen to me, but I am going to let this go for my sake. And that the pain and the bitterness is killing me. And so I'm the one who needs to let it go. Number two is I don't want to forgive because the other person isn't sorry. Now, this mindset seems to imply that forgiveness is for the other person. And that I would give it if they showed enough penance, if they were sorry enough, if they showed a lot of sorrow and they begged or this, that, and the other thing. If I seen something on the other side that shows that they might be worthy of this forgiveness. Now, this totally gets the mindset mixed up. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is what is happening inside of you. Now, there are things happening inside of, if we're holding on to bitterness, we're holding on to the pain, and we're just like, we're holding on to it. That is causing us pain. It's much like the meme that I've seen about the snake. It is a boa constrictor, and as you know, snakes, the way that they handle an enemy is that they wrap around the enemy and they squeeze tight, right? This is how they immobilize their prey before they eat it. We understand that. But in this meme, it showed a saw blade, okay? And the snake wrapped around the saw blade and began to constrict. And the more and more it fights and the more it constricts, the deeper the saw blade goes inside the snake. What does that mean for us? That means that we need to understand that the pain and the bitterness, when we rise up inside and we begin to fight it, we say, you know what, I need this justice. I'm not going to be okay until I get justice. And we're just squeezing and we're trying to control all of these things. We don't understand the bitterness that we are releasing inside of our lives. Have you noticed that most people that are justice pioneers are filled with hate? And they have to feed that hate and feed that bitterness and feed the hate inside of other people and maintain the image of being oppressed, like there's a boot upon their neck and all this imaginary things that they have to keep up to keep the hate alive so it can keep consuming other people. And so the damage that we do is to ourselves. Number three, the people that hurt me don't deserve to be forgiven. Now, this may be a reality, right? The people that hurt you or that have caused you pain, they may not be sorry in one iota. They may not show any signs of change whatsoever. In fact, they may be continually doing this thing to other people and continually making victims, right? Now, it really has nothing to do with what they are doing. It has everything to do with what is going on inside of our hearts. And that is, they may not deserve to be forgiven. Now, that's a given. Like, if there's no change, there's no transformation, and they continually do the same thing, in my mind, in my perspective, it doesn't look like they deserve to be forgiven. But the reality is, coming back to me, am I going to let this hate consume my life? Am I going to let that bitterness consume my heart? And do I deserve to let this go so I can live in freedom? Do I deserve to release this so I can be free? That's the problem we have. When it comes down to our self-worth, we don't believe that we are worthy of a good life. And we go into the self-destructive style of self-sabotage, which we'll talk about in a later date. But we go into this mode of destroying ourselves. And this is what happens when we refuse to let go of this pain. We are actually the ones who are inflicting the pain upon ourselves. Repeatedly, over and over, by nursing and rehearsing all these wounds. And by not taking authority and by not saying, you know what, I'm going to release this pain and I'm going to let it go. Number 4, I would forgive them, but I don't in any way want to condone their behavior. This is a common one, and that is, once again, looking at the behavior and saying, I'm not going to forgive them, or I'm not going to condone them because what they did was wrong. And so once we begin to release that story and begin to understand that forgiveness is about us and it has nothing to do with them, we can begin to release some of these narratives that are taking place inside of our lives. The next one I can think of is that I don't want to forgive them because I don't trust them, and I'll probably never trust them again. And what I want to say to that is very fine and dandy. That is okay. In fact, I highly recommend, if a person hasn't demonstrated a new track record, you shouldn't trust them again. And that's just common sense, and of course, not putting yourself in danger. Now, I've said this many times, but all you really know about a person is their track record. And that is that people continually do what they have done. And if they want a different reputation, they're going to have a different track record. And that means they're going to have to go through a process of change and begin to demonstrate that they are worthy of trust. Here's the reality. Let me break it down to your home. If you had a son who decided that he wanted to get addicted to drugs and he wanted to steal your money. Now, the reality is that trust is going to be broken. Now, you could decide to forgive and release it and let it go and not take it personally, and all of these different things that kind of forgiveness requires, that we can let go of the bitterness. But the reality is, unless they develop a different track record, trust is not going to be a reality. And therefore, forgiveness has nothing to do with continual trust. It actually has nothing to do with a continual relationship either. Now, just because you want to forgive somebody and release the pain doesn't mean that you want to allow them into your life again. And I find that to be very important, because sometimes we mix up the two. Well, forgiveness means that I'm going to have some sort of amicable relationship, and we're going to start talking and different stuff. And all of that has nothing to do with the forgiveness and the pain and the bitterness that is going on inside of you. I can release that and still not trust you. I can release that and I can keep you at a distance based upon the track record in what you have been producing, and say, you know what, I'm not going to put myself in a position that I'm going to be hurt. That is really important. The next one that I see take place, and it happened in my own life, is that, you know, the person is dead, therefore I don't have the ability to forgive. Now this one, you know, we understand that forgiveness doesn't have to have a conversation with that person. I think it's really important to understand that. Sometimes we correlate the two. If I forgive, that means that I have to go and have a conversation with this person and somehow reconcile and establish a relationship once again. Now, there are times where that might be the case, especially if you feel like a relationship should be pursued or that a relationship should continue. Then there might need to go to that person. I had to do that with my mother and begin to face some things and to just deal with the pain that was going on because I wanted to continue seeing her in the future. And so I find that to be very important. But when it's dealing with people that are no longer here, what do we do? Now, I had a revelation 4 or 5 years ago that I still had animosity towards my stepfather. My stepfather is no longer here. He's been dead for a while due to drugs. And there's not a conversation that can be had with him. So what do? We release it. We make a decision that we are going to release them. Now, you could do a ritual if you want. You could do it in a form of a letter and burn it. You could do it, you know, any way that you want to. Journaling or making a declaration or all these different ways that you can kind of concrete it and seal it. But what it all comes down to is a decision that I'm going to release them from what has taken place inside of my life. The next one is, I don't want to forgive the other person because it won't bring any closure. Now this once again has to do with the other person. Now I've seen people who have went to make amends and have a conversation with another person and who have opened their heart in forgiveness and wanting to move forward and to release those things, and the other person takes it in a very flippant attitude and treats us like nothing, like it's nothing. And so in that case, you got to understand that this conversation was meant for you to release the pain. Now, you have no control over the response that takes place thereafter. We don't have any guarantee that what we are saying is going to that we're going to get any positive affirmation or positive feedback from the person that we're engaging with. And so we have to let go of the outcomes that are connected with that, because they may very well say, wow, I don't even remember doing that. And you are so sensitive that you need to grow a pair and get a spine and all this stuff. So we don't know what's going to take place from the other side. So releasing the outcomes is really, really important. I don't want to, because they will never know how much pain they have caused me. Now, this is part of, releasing and having forgiveness and letting it go in private and dealing with it and journaling it and going through the process of just releasing people and not having that conversation with them, because it might be dangerous for you, or it could be lead to danger for them, or they're just not open to this kind of conversation. If you begin to go through the process, you begin to release it and you begin to let go, they may never know the real pain that that they have caused you. And this is definitely a barrier to releasing and letting go. Because the reason is that when an injustice takes place, something happens to you and you have been wronged, everything within your mind says an injustice has taken place and that you have been wronged. And there's no erasing the reality of being wronged, right? And so automatically you stand at a moral high ground. And that is that you take on the mindset of you hope and wish that pain would be afflicted upon them, that there would be some sort of justice in this situation. And releasing and letting go, let's go of all of that narrative and all of that dialogue. And that means the meditations of your heart of exacting revenge and getting your pound of flesh comes to an end. And the anger stops and the bitterness stops and all those narratives and stories about how you're going to get revenge or how you wish fate would kick them in the butt and really show them, or how you wish God would give them a lot of misery and a lot of pain. All that comes to an end. And so we have to be willing to let go of all of those different things. Now, forgiveness is not excusing the actions of another person. When you forgive someone, you don't even have to tell them that they're forgiven. This doesn't even have to come into the equation unless you choose it. There is a false belief out there, and that is that if you forgive someone, that you won't ever feel the pain again. And I find that just to be not true. Not true. And with that is, because I have forgiven, that means that that I will forget this, or I'll never think about this again, and or the pain won't resurface in a future date. And what we have to understand is that forgiveness is a process. It is a decision. And that is, if the pain resurfaces, I remake my decision. And if I begin to face it again and I begin to have angry feelings again, I remind myself that I am deciding to let this go for my own personal benefit. I am deciding to let this go. And so once again, when these feelings arise, we say, oh man, I haven't really forgiven, right? Not understanding that it is definitely a process. There are wounds and there are things that take place, and they're pretty deep. Now, to think that you can one day go, I decide to forgive, and never think about that again, or it never come up again, is just setting ourselves up for failure. Now, I had a fallout with a good friend that I had a couple years ago, and it ended up in court and different stuff that took place. I didn't like the situation. I felt a great injustice was taking place, and all of these different things. So I faced, the pain of being bitter. Through this process, I decided to let go, and that is, no longer wish pain or misery upon a person, but just begin to let it go and say, you know what, I'm not going to let anger and bitterness fill my life with this situation anymore. And that being said, I've made this decision, okay? But then through a circumstance of social media, I heard his voice again, and then it resurfaced the thoughts and the feelings that I once had. What is this that takes place? I want to explain this. That there are things that happen to us that begin to, they're almost etched in stone in the tablets of our heart, and they become seared, if you will, on your subconscious. And that is that you can have a triggering moment that will take you back to those feelings. Now, during this time, we say, oh man, I must not have forgiven. I must have still had this. But the reality is that you went through something traumatic. Okay? You went through something that caused you a lot of pain. And there are going to be ripple effects of that and triggers that will take you back. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not on the path to forgive. What you do is you reestablish the path that you're on, and you say, you know what, I have decided that I was going to let go of this pain and let go of this bitterness, and I'm not going to allow my mind to constantly think about the injustice and therefore become a cancer to my soul. And so when it comes up again, you reestablish the same commitment. And I think that's really, really important to understand. Thinking that you are going to forget. And I know that's a nice cliche, right? You got to forgive and forget. And some people even say, the Bible says you have to forgive and forget. And like we have that capacity. God says, our sins and our iniquities will he remember no more, and he will cast into the sea of forgetfulness, never to be remembered again. And so God does that with us, and he's all powerful, so he can choose to do whatever he wants, right? And so he can choose to allow this to take place. But as far as us in our humanity, we do not have the ability to forget. And that is, there is going to be memories, and there is going to be things that are still present there. And don't be deceived in thinking that you haven't established that you are going to let go and you're going to walk the path of forgiveness just because they resurface. Super important. Super important. Forgiveness is something you do so the other person can move on. That is totally false. Now, like I said, it has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with you and how you are going to release it and to let these things go. So, here are the facts. That unforgiveness, bitterness, and resentments, they all cause biological, physical, mental things that go on. And that is, if we decided to hold on to these things, we are going to experience a lot more stress. Once we accept them, we begin to release them. And what I recommend is what I talked about earlier, is that you begin to write them out and you begin to say, you know what, I am releasing this pain. This is what happened to me. This is the feelings that I've caused, and this is why I am bitter, and I am choosing to let go of this. Just begin to document it out, right? And begin to release and let go. If we go through this process of forgiveness, there are certain benefits that are going to take place. If we don't go through this process and we hold on to all the pain, there are certain negative consequences we can expect. Number one, stress. We are going to be stressed out. We're going to be overloaded. We are going to be overwhelmed. Because here's what the pain and the unforgiveness and bitterness does, is that it is considered a weight. And it is something that you are carrying. It is something very heavy. And so by natural, you are going to be burdened by this thing. And so what that means is that it is going to cause you stress. And that is, you'll probably even show it in your physical demeanor. And you're going to show it in your mental mindset. And you're going to be overloaded. And you're going to be stressed out all the time. Because you weren't meant to carry that. That was not your load. And so if you choose to release it, then what do you get? Releasing is just letting it go. And what is it? It's taking the things that are on your plate that you don't want on your plate. You don't want to carry these anymore. And you're dropping them off. And we'll talk about that more next week. So stress. It'll also cause your anger to decrease. Because as you're not rehearsing all of these things and going through the story of how you were hurt and how all this pain began to happen to you, and you begin to release that story, the anger and the rage goes down. You're no longer angry and bitter all the time. You're actually more free-flowing, more stress-free. Less angry, more happy. Now, this in turn, of course, lowers your risk of depression. Like I said, when we go through this process of pain, we have these different options to be extremely angry, enraged, or go within and be depressed. And then we seek relief through substances, through activities, through cutting, through all these different things that we get ourselves involved into are just for comfort. And so we don't have to deal with the pain. But true freedom is looking at the pain and releasing the pain. And this, of course, decreases your your risk of being depressed all the time. Now, scientifically, it has been proven that releasing these things and letting go of the pain, it is good for your heart. It's going to lower your blood pressure, and your anxiety level is going to go down. And then also, lastly, a really important factor, that it is going to repair damaged relationships. And so as you look at this holistically and say, you know what, if I choose to let these things go, my stress is going to decrease, my depression is going to decrease, my anger, my anxiety, and all these things that people are taking pills to help them. A lot of these things can be solved by acceptance, by looking at the truth, by dealing with your emotions, and choosing to release and to let go of the things that have happened to us. Now, it's our decision. So if you're looking at your life and saying, you know what, I am stressed out, I am angry, I am depressed, I have a lot of anxiety, right? These are the four things that are plaguing our society. And we say, you know what, these are indicators that I am holding on to something that I should be letting go. I should be letting go. And it's my choice on whether I want to continue in this anxiety, in this depression, in this anger, in this stress, or if I want to begin to release this and begin to go on the process of healing. The choice is ours. All right, brothers, I will see you on week 4, and we are going to set this thing in stone on how to let go of all of these things that we need to let go of, because they are killing us, literally. All right, brothers, peace.